So I wanted to illustrate the sequence in the construction process. And we start out with a site. The contractor has a hole dug in the site, slightly larger than the actual shape of the house, so that the workers have some room to work around their work below grade, specifically the forming of the basement wall. So a hole is dug, first of all, and then secondly, foundations are put in. So underneath the basement walls, we have pad footings, and underneath all of the columns in the house, we have pad footings as well to distribute the loads from above to the earth itself. So you can see that the second step is that the contractor forms the basement walls. And if you look closely here, you can see the brick ledge. When we made our stacked wall, we had a 12-inch concrete wall to here, and then we made that an 8-inch concrete wall because we needed a ledge for the brick to sit on. And that was what we called it. We called it a brick ledge. So after the forms are removed and the concrete is walls are in place, the earth is filled back in between the larger opening of the earth and the actual wall of the basement, so that tradespeople can step from the ground right onto the project, and there's not a big void space all the way around the house. So the next step is the columns and beams are placed. Now the beams, we placed our beams underneath the load-bearing walls above. We're transferring the loads from all the way at the top of the house from the roof to the load-bearing walls, and underneath those load-bearing walls we place steel beams, and those steel beams are supported by steel columns, generally 3.5-inch round steel columns underneath that. And that would be the step one, is that the steel beams and the steel columns have to be put in place. And then on top of that, the framing crew, the carpenter crew, come in and they put a sill plate all the way around the house and on top of the steel beams, so that they have some lumber to nail their framing system to. And this starts to look familiar to you because we put our rim joists all the way around the house first, and then we filled inside of those rim joists, we put our structural framing, depending on which way we chose to span, to show the span. Now you also see that there are some things that I call ladders underneath certain parts of the building. Wherever there's a wall above that is parallel to the floor joist, we have to double the floor joists underneath it or provide ladders. I call that ladders anyway. And that's a framing that supports the wall above and transfers those loads to the floor joists on both sides. And the reason is that that wall can come down and not sit on any kind of structural member, and it's just sitting on the plywood, and the plywood is not capable of supporting the weight of the walls above, possibly, so we put these ladders in. The other thing that we can do is double the floor joists underneath the walls above, but if we do that, it makes it difficult if you want to get some kind of ductwork into the walls above. If you have double floor joists underneath it, then there's really no space to put ductwork, to get ductwork from a lower level to an upper level. So the laddering really works better, and that's my personal preference. The next step after the floor joists are put in is the plywood floor goes in. Carpenters put the plywood floor in, and remember, we cut openings for what? For the stairs, so there wouldn't be any framing or plywood subfloor there. And the next thing that carpenters would do, they would put in their first floor studs inside of the walls that we have determined where we want them to be. Now, wherever there's a large opening for a window or for a door, we have loads coming down, but there's nothing below that because it's glass and it's not able to carry any load. So we have to put headers across there, which allow us to transfer the loads from that are coming down to columns on both sides or underneath our headers. And so this is essentially what your framing would look like. You're not required to do that in this class, but it gives you an idea how your walls will be constructed. And if you start thinking about that, it can be very beneficial to the construction process. You also notice that there are some pieces of lumber about halfway up some of these walls, and that's simply a fire stop, so that if there was a fire in this cavity, for example, it wouldn't be able to travel all the way up without being slowed down by these fire stops. And so that's an important element for the actual construction as well. So the carpenters have now, they've got their first floor walls framed in, they've got their openings for their windows and for their doors. And then the next thing that they would do is put the second floor framing on. And again, you can see we have our bond coming across here. That's what we put in. And then we put our framing inside of our bond areas. And then you can see some more laddering areas here and here. So wherever there's a wall that's parallel, we would double joist underneath it or put these ladders in to carry the weight, because the wall sitting on plywood only wouldn't have the ability to transfer the loads. The plywood couldn't carry that weight. But when your walls are perpendicular, then these floor joists are actually carrying the loads of the walls above. So we would put that in. And the next step the carpenters would do is they would put plywood, that plywood subfloor on top of their framing below. And you can see, if you look real close here, you can see that remember, we put our bond in flush with our plywood subfloor, and the carpenters built that bond on the first floor. Then they come in and they nail down the plywood subfloor. Now I ask them to nail, glue, and screw. So they have to do all. They have to glue the plywood. They have to nail the plywood, and they have to screw the plywood to the framing below. And then the next thing that the carpenters would do is put in the framing for the second floor. And as you can see, the framing for the second floor is quite similar in concept to the framing in the first floor. And then once that's finished, then they can put the roof on top of that. So just a little demonstration for you with respect to the way that the sequencing is in your project. And think a little bit about how these components are actually going to be constructed in your project. It might help you on making a decision on where you're going to put walls and doors and openings and things like that. But this might have been more helpful at the beginning. Unfortunately, I'm building a demonstration model for this class, going through it step by step, and I just got to the completion of the framing of the model. But again, you're not required to do this framing on the inside of your walls.